Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of American Rambler. I'm your host, Colin Woodward. Thank you for listening to the podcast. On today's show, I have LaQuita Scaife. She is the daughter of Cecil Scaife, who was a promoter at Sun Records in the 1950s at the height of Sun Records, when Sam Phillips had a roster that included Elvis, Johnny Cash, Carl Perkins, Charlie Rich, Jerry Lee Lewis, Roy Orbison, Sonny Burgess, and so on and so on. Probably the greatest explosion of American music at one place ever. I can't think of a better time for rock music, certainly. Early rock music. I guess you could call it more rockabilly, but there was country in there, and blues and gospel. And for any of you who've read about Johnny Cash or Elvis, you know that story. And if you also listen to the podcast, you know I've been writing a book about Johnny Cash for many years. I'm winding up work on that. It's finally done. It will be about a 10-year journey to complete that book. But I gave a talk recently for a history group in Franklin, Tennessee, which is not too far from Nashville, better known for a Civil War battle is Franklin, Tennessee, one that did not go well for the Confederacy, but it's a well-known battle, and I'm sure Johnny Cash at some point probably walked the grounds around there, being the Civil War buff and history buff that he was. But anyway, I gave this talk online a few weeks ago, and LaQuita reached out to me. She said she had some good stories about her dad, who was involved with Sun, and he later worked at Columbia. So we had a nice chat, and it's going to turn into an encyclopedia entry for the Encyclopedia of Arkansas, because Cecil did have an interesting life and career. He was at Sun and then Columbia, as was Johnny Cash. And in the 1970s, Cecil started his own label, which was very successful, producing gospel music and Christmas compilations and things like that you maybe find at Walmart or Target now. But at the time, there really wasn't much of a template for doing that kind of thing, especially with gospel records. So he made an imprint on that. So we have a nice talk, and she's got some good stories about meeting the Sun guys. She was born in Arkansas, as was Cecil, so I'm able to talk some Arkansas yet again. But it really is amazing how many of the early rock and rollers had an Arkansas connection, either directly or indirectly, I guess. An indirect connection would maybe be someone like Jack Clement, who was from Memphis, but had family in Arkansas, and he would hang out there in the summers, and he wrote songs about that experience and talked fondly about his days sitting in his bedroom at his relative's house, listening to girls sing "You Are My Sunshine" down the street. No air conditioning, just the screen doors, screen windows. It's been hard enough finishing this book on Cash, but I think there's probably a book to be written about Arkansas and early rock and roll. I think certainly an article where if I ever get the energy, I'll write that for the Arkansas Times or something else. But wanted to get this out before Christmas as kind of a Christmas present to y'all. I don't know how you all are doing. I'm sure you're getting ready for the holidays. I know a lot of professors online and stuff. I know a lot of professors who are desperately trying to wind up this semester, which has been a rough one and been kind of rough for everybody, regardless of what you're doing. If things have been going great, that's good. I'm barely hanging on here. Been having a tough time with this cold that just will not go away. Everyone's had it here, and I was kind of the last one to get it. And that feeling of knowing everyone is sick in your family, and you are going to get sick at some point, because this is a nasty virus. It's definitely not COVID. Been tested repeatedly, as has my wife, but she had bronchitis, and the kids have been sick. And I think a lot of it has to do with the kids going back to school, and once that happens, you're kind of sick all the time as a parent. So I got that, and then I hit my head on my guitar yesterday, and that freaked me out. I went to Patient First to get some stitches. Didn't get any stitches, but was at Patient First for 3 hours. The longest I've ever been to Patient First, and longest I've ever been to the doctor for a long time. So not a fun day yesterday. And it sucks when you get injured in your own house, in your own study on a guitar. So it's a very stupid injury, but that's kind of usually how they are. I was sober and everything. It was just a freak accident. I'm just like, what the hell happened? What the hell just happened to me? So got a nice little Christmas present there on my forehead, bandaged up, and could have just stayed home and saved the 3 hours. They were very concerned about testing me for COVID, but didn't seem too concerned about why I was actually there. Usually good experience at patient first, but they were swamped yesterday. And I mean, who would have thought that this is where we would be at with our primary care here in this country? I mean, kind of CVS is turning into a primary care provider for a lot of people, but that's where we are when, it takes a month to see your regular doctor. I'll just go to patient first or go to CVS to get my shots. So hang in there, trying to make it to the finish line in 2021. I think it's safe to say it's not been an easy year. So if you made it through 2021, I know we still have 2 weeks. If you make it through this one, congratulations. All right. Well, on a cheerier note, you can enjoy this talk. Me and LaQuita Scaife, some great stories here. It was great talking to her, so I'm glad she reached out and we could do this. All right, here we go.
Are you from here, Colin? Are you from Nashville? Where are you from?
Well, I'm in Richmond, Virginia.
Ah, okay.
And I'm not originally from here, but I've lived here a while now. You're in Franklin?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Which is not too far from Nashville.
No.
Right? Yeah.
Did you ever live in Nashville?
No, I've only been there once, and it was a memorable trip. My wife got food poisoning.
Oh.
But our daughter, our oldest at the time, she was really young, and I went to see the Johnny Cash Museum.
Uh-huh.
And I did, but my poor wife got so sick. I think we were maybe there 2 nights, so it was just kind of like a weekend.
Hard. That's the worst.
Yeah, so it didn't put me off of Nashville necessarily, but was not a great experience. But now I would certainly like to go back. How long have you lived there?
Since I was 9 years old.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And Sam Phillips moved us here.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
When was that?
I'll give you a little history if you want.
Sure, yeah.
Give you a little history of how I got so involved in this just through osmosis, I think. My dad, Cecil Scaife, really the music career began very early at KFFA in Helena, Arkansas, where we're all from. So
yeah.
It was daddy, mother, and then there were 4 of us. And then Sam hired him, Sam Phillips, as the first national sales and promotion manager for Sun Records. Of course, that was in Memphis. It was about 56 miles north of Helena, so Dad would make that trip every day. But his biggest act, of course, was Elvis, who was nobody at the time.
Right.
And everyone was a little bit afraid of Elvis because he was so different and he had all these gyrations and he was so handsome and that voice. But Dad would take his 45 records to all the different radio stations and say, please, you got to play this. You just got to play this. And to this day, I have some of the original 45 records in their sleeve that Daddy kept in a box that he took around to the early days. This was in the 50s.
Yeah.
In Memphis. And then as Sam, brought in bigger acts, Johnny Cash and Carl Perkins, Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Mann, Charlie Rich, the label grew and we moved to right outside of Palm Beach to a radio station. Sam moved us there for Dad to manage an all-girl radio station called WLIZ, Liz, all girls. So we were in Florida for maybe a year or so. My mother hated it. She said, sand is everywhere. It's in the house. It's in the bed. It's everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
We came home. But Sam said, okay, Nashville's going to be the new place for music. Will y'all go to Nashville? And that might as well been Egypt to us. There were no interstates. It took so long to get here from Helena, Arkansas. But, through many tears, we packed up and we came to Nashville. And Dad started working at a recording studio here. He hired Billy Sherrill. I'm sure you've heard of Billy Sherrill, great producer, Tammy Wynette, and just so many that he, found. So they started recording in the studio. And then later on, Daddy left Sam and went with Columbia and really started working with Johnny Cash then. And it was amazing. My childhood was amazing because I didn't know who any of these people were. And a lot of them were just up and coming at that time.
Yeah.
And, now I wish I could go back and sit at my dining room table and just ask them so many questions that I didn't know to ask then. I just knew we never knew who was going to be at our table for dinner. And
That's
Dad,
amazing.
He had such a heart for struggling musicians. Charlie Rich came in one night and we had a dining room table, no living room furniture, but we had a dining room table. And I remember him sitting at the end of the table with that gorgeous silver hair. I mean, beautiful hair. I just knew that Daddy said, now his nickname is the Silver Fox. And I thought, well, how sweet. And my little sister, LaQuita, she said, Mother and Daddy needed my brother Joe and LaQuita to get to Memphis to meet grandparents, and they had no way to get them there. They didn't want to put him on a bus. So Dad said, hey, Charlie, would you mind taking them to Memphis? He said, no, Cecil, I'll be happy to. So Charlie Rich is hauling my siblings down to Memphis because he was so sweet. He was
yeah. Well, he's from Arkansas.
Uh-huh.
And were you born in Helena?
Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah, because I wanted to learn about your dad, and turns out he was born in Phillips County.
Yeah.
Not quite Helena, though?
Yeah, maybe not quite Helena, but it's the same county.
Okay, yeah, it looked pretty close to Helena, even. Was it Marvel? Is that how you say it?
I don't know if it was Marvel or Barton.
Okay.
It may have been Marvel.
I might have mentioned in my talk, I lived in Little Rock for a few years, and I got to see a good part of the state, and Helena's a pretty fascinating town. I mean, musically amazing.
And the Civil War,
right?
All the Confederate generals and soldiers that came out of there.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned Charlie Rich, but also Levon Helm is from around there.
Yes.
Al Green is up at Forest City, which again not that far. Sonny Boy Williamson, I think, was from there. So yeah, just amazing blues, country, and one thing I've discovered in doing research on guys like Cash, Charlie Rich, that whole Sun Gang is like, they weren't quite really country. I mean, Elvis obviously is known as a rock and roll guy, but like, they kind of mix it up with blues, rock, rockabilly, I guess you could call it. But they all kind of sounded.
Jerry Lee Lewis.
Jerry Lee Lewis, right? Sonny Burgess, another Archie, from closer to where Cash was from. But yeah, it was amazing to see all those guys emerge at the same time. And it sounds like your dad obviously was there on the ground floor, but how did he sort of make that leap into, working with Sam Phillips? I mean, was he a musician kind of looking for music work? No.
Couldn't carry a tune, couldn't play an instrument. But Dad was very creative.
Okay.
And talented beyond talent in how to find a niche in the business. And his brother was very musical, Don Scaife.
Okay.
Wrote songs and played, and hence you've heard of Ronnie Scaife, who was my first cousin. Great musician, and he passed away several years ago, tragically. My other cousin, George Scaife, Daddy's brother Basil, who died shortly after he came home from the war. He's in a band, very talented. So there's a whole big talent on the Scaife side of the family, musically talent. But Daddy was more business, a visionary. He was a great visionary.
Yeah.
Mother was like the high school beauty queen, cheerleader, homecoming queen, just just the sweet little girl. And Daddy met her. He went in Montgomery Ward one day. Mother was working there at 14, and he saw her. He was about 6.5 years older. He said, I'm going to marry that little girl one day. Mortified my grandmother and granddaddy. They said, stay away from that man. Those Scaifes have a bad reputation in this town, because Dad grew up without a father. It was his mother. They lived in the middle of cotton fields and soybean fields. I think they had one cow. His dad was tragically shot at when my dad was 3 years old. So he grew up totally dirt poor. I mean, dirt poor, and struggled. But he finished high school. He put himself through college. I think he got his master's. But he just kept trying to find, where is my niche? He had that passion, because somewhere it was deep down in him, though it wasn't the talent part of the music. And Mother used to sit in front of Conway Twitty in school. And she said Conway would pull her pigtails every day. And she said, honey, Conway Twitty could have been your daddy, because he was so in love with Mother. Mother was really a stunner, and Daddy was a very, very handsome man. So they just made, when they came to Nashville, they were a gorgeous music scene couple. They just kind of fit that look of, beauty, stardom, Hollywood type stuff. And Daddy knew how to dress her. So they really fit that bill of attending all of the music things that were here in Nashville. And people were drawn to my dad. He was very witty, great conversationalist, and he was always coming up with creative things. I know he went to Washington one year and said, I am going to really make an effort with our Congress and Senate not to have drugs written into these songs. Of course, that didn't happen, but he was so pro good music that was not going to taint our young people. A lot of stories like that. He was one of the founding people that started this music school at Belmont. It was the Mud Curb Music School. He and Bob Malloy, because Dad had offices on Music Row here in Nashville. He had 2 offices. And, back then people would just walk door to door and say, would you please listen to my cassette? Yeah. And Dad would always invite them in and talk with them and encourage them every way he could and try to give them a little bit of advice. And he said, look, I think we need to start a school, at least have some classes that these kids can attend and know the pros and cons of the music, how not to be shystered, as so many are, and just learn some basics of music business. So that's how the Belmont Mike Curb School of Music Business started. Yeah. He also worked for Columbia Records for a while.
Yeah. Well, how did he initially meet Sam Phillips?
I don't know how he met Sam, if he just met him through the radio station, if he just knew who he was. I don't know the initial connection of how he met Sam. Okay.
But he was working at a radio station in Helena.
KFSA.
Okay. Did he work on the King Biscuit show ever?
No, he did not. I know that's a huge thing in Helena, and I've been there a couple of times. It's fascinating. Sunny boy. When this is when I met Johnny Cash. When I was at Belmont, of course, I went to Belmont, and it was, at the end of Music Row. And I remember walking in one day to Columbia, and his secretary, or the receptionist, Norma Jean. I said, Norma Jean, I need to see my dad. And she said, well, he's in there with Johnny Cash. And I'd heard the name, but I'm in college. Right. Yes. I said, well, I really need to see him. And so she said, well, I'm sure he won't mind. So I, kind of knocked on the door and went in. And of course, Dad always glad to see me. Honey, come in. I want you to meet Johnny Cash. And Johnny was sitting in a chair. And of course, the chair, he just consumed the chair. He was so big and large and tall, just bigger than life. And I looked at him and I said, well, hello, Mr. Cash. And I turned back to Dad and I said, Daddy, speaking of cash, I need some. And so, of course, Daddy never had a nickel in his pocket because Mother kept all the money. Okay. He never, as most men, I don't have any. But anyway, that's how I met Johnny Cash. And then one of my dear friends at Belmont was dating one of June Carter's daughters. And so they ended up getting married, and I got invited to the wedding and got to go to the reception at Johnny and June's house in Hendersonville. Wow. So that was another just real fun little thing for me to get to do. But that's where I met Johnny Cash. But when Dad was at Columbia, Dad got to present Johnny with his number one single, his number one gold record, his first number one single gold record, which was I Walk the Line, and that was in 1956.
Wow.
So that was a really big, that was a pretty big deal.
So when you met Cash, do you know around what year that might have been?
Yeah, that was probably in 1970, maybe 71.
Okay, so he's huge beyond huge at that point. I mean, he's got the TV show, he's done Folsom, he's done San Quentin, so yeah, he was probably like, he kind of had his big hair and his sideburns and
and nice, just so nice.
Yeah, no, I imagine. Do you remember him saying anything when you walked in and asked for money?
Oh, he just chuckled.
Yeah.
He chuckled. Now, at the same time, I'm meeting Johnny Cash. Guess who's sweeping the floors at Columbia?
Christopherson?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a janitor there. But, you know, he kept throwing these songs out. I mean, everybody in the world would go in Columbia to record or hope to record or just hang out. Because back then, everybody would hang out. And it was so different back then. I remember Daddy owned a recording studio that he bought. And one day at the recording studio, Daddy's guitar player, he was having a big session. The guitar player couldn't show up. So Daddy called across the street, Chet Atkins, said, Chet, my guitar player didn't show up. I wonder if you could please come in and fill in for me. And Chet said, sure, Cecil, I'll be happy to. Let me get my guitar, let me warm up a little bit, and I'll be right over. And he did. And that was the beauty of the industry back then, because there was no big contracts. There was no big sign this, sign that. It was just everybody wanted everybody to succeed.
Yeah.
Probably not everybody, but the majority, that was kind of the attitude of the musicians, the singers. I mean, this whole thing, it was kind of new. The country music thing was, you know, it was a little bit new. We're having, you know, Patsy Cline's coming up and Hawkshaw Hawkins, and who I went to school with his son and remember the day that they were killed at Maplewood High School. Of course, Brenda Lee, she was just, you know, the darling of everyone there. And so it was quite a, it was quite a childhood, and I didn't appreciate it like I appreciate it right now.
Yeah.
Coming and going in my life.
No, do you have, I mean, I'm sure your dad had a lot of stuff that he collected over the years. Do you still have that, like photos and letters and things?
I have some things. I do. I have a few things that he collected. I don't have a lot. Some of my siblings have some other things, you know, that Dad collected through the years.
Yeah.
But I think I'm most proud of, I do have a beautiful picture of Daddy presenting Johnny Cash with his first gold record. Daddy has a flat top then, and it was just awesome.
He had the Conway Twitty kind of hairdo.
Oh, it was just, yeah. You know, all the guys got that back then.
Right. Somebody described it as a riverboat haircut, which I really liked.
Funny.
Yeah, they all kind of get that like slicked yet big. It's kind of like this amazing pompadour that they all cultivate. Of course, Elvis had one, but you had to have a good head of hair because they weren't wearing cowboy hats at Sun.
No. And poor Dad was losing some of his hair, so he would try every way in the world to have hair. I think that was his biggest demise of his self-esteem was, I'm losing my hair.
Well, your dad sounds like he wanted to be an actor.
Yes.
At one point. He went to L.A.?
Yes. And this is another great little story. When Dad was promoting Elvis around Memphis and Arkansas, early on, actually, I think Dad may have still been in college. He may have been working on something in college, but he loved to act, and he was in a play, and they had some scouts from Hollywood there. Must have been a pretty big play. And they got Daddy after the play and said, look, we would like to send you to Hollywood because we think that you would be a great actor.
Yeah.
And Dad was so excited about it. So he went to Elvis and said, Elvis, I'm going to Hollywood. I think you should go with me because I think you'd be a terrific actor. So Elvis said to Dad, Cecil, I don't think I can act, but what I need is a manager. Would you be my manager? And Daddy said, Elvis, I don't think you are big enough for a manager. Go to Hollywood with me. So they both kind of messed it up.
Yeah.
But then later on, Dad did go to New York, and he was off Broadway for a couple of plays. And
okay, because I don't know if you ever go to IMDb, but it looks like he has some credits there from the 60s.
Yes,
kind of like sort of like B movie type of things.
Yeah, little B movie stuff. Yeah, he got in with Ron Orman, and actually, I was in one of those movies.
Oh yeah,
mm-hmm.
Which one was that?
If Footmen Tire, What Will Horsemen Do? Which I never understood the name of the movie. And listen, Colin, I've had people call me. They say, this is a cult movie now. I've had people call and interview me about that movie.
Really?
Yes.
What was the setup there?
The setup was, it was Reverend Perkins. He was a pastor. And the story was, if America doesn't shape up and become a Christian nation, the communists are going to come over like they did, over in Germany. And France and Poland, and they're going to do to us what what happened over there.
Yeah,
what the Germans did to all the Jews. So this was the plot, and I want to tell you, it was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life.
It sounds like a Western.
Well, it wasn't a Western though. It was filmed in a little town in Mississippi, and the funny thing is, the part I played, I was a housewife sitting in our little house. I was sewing, and there was a knock on the door, and I'm going, who in the world would that be this time of night? So my husband goes to the door, and there is a communist comrade, and he's dressed in this uniform, and he wants to come in, and the comrade was my dad. And it was kind of funny trying to play off my dad. It was just weird, but I will never forget that experience.
Yeah.
So that was one. And then he was in, I think, the Hollywood Beach Murders and, a couple of other things, which was just, they were totally B movies. And I look at them today and just burst out laughing like, oh my goodness. But, Tim Orman, Ron Orman's son, has kind of carried on in that movie world, and we've remained friends. So Nashville is full of stories of recording and singing and acting, and if it's in your bloodline, it's just in your bloodline.
Yeah. What was like when your dad? I know you weren't sure how exactly he met Sam Phillips, but he was working at the radio station, doing kind of promotion for local bands or something.
I don't know what he did at KFFK.
Okay.
I don't know if he was on air or maybe he worked off air and just did, some of those things. I never knew really what he did, but, I never really knew what my dad did.
I think that's pretty common. I don't think kids, my daughter was asking me the other day what I did, and it was kind of like, okay, I guess that's cool. Like, I don't think it really made sense to her.
Well, my granddaddy really put it in perspective. And he was from Helena, Arkansas also. And he came to Nashville, of course, many times, but he went to their office on Music Row. Now, this was after Dad had left Columbia, and he had started Music Incorporated. And this was another niche that Daddy started. He did budget Christmas music, and he used various artists, no name, not really any big name artist, but he would buy the masters, and he would do all of these he would do like bells or choirs, or he did a Christmas tribute to Elvis. Just beautiful music. I think I don't know how many, 36, 40 different titles. And he was the number one budget Christmas music company in America until people started replicating him, of course. But he would sell to Target or Walmart or Dollar General, that. And I mean, they did very, very well with this. And then he started a second label, Songs of Faith, which was the first gospel label created in America.
Wow.
And Dad also was one of the founding partners in the Gospel Music Association. So he helped, promote all of that. But when my granddaddy came to Nashville, he went in their office one day and he looked around. He knew that we made records and we sold them. And he looked around and he goes, I don't know how Cecil makes a living. There's not a damn record in this building. So I guess he thought we had a record store. I don't.
Right. Yeah. So was your dad was a religious person?
He was a spiritual person. I mean,
okay.
We were brought up in the Baptist church, went all the time. And I think Mother was a lot more religious than Dad, as sometimes it is. But no, we went all the time.
Yeah. I mean, not that you necessarily have to be religious to put out gospel records, but
no. I mean, but he did believe in what and he did Southern gospel. So a lot of the early Southern gospel groups, with the big hair, the flashy jackets, and some were a little overweight. Those big old Southern gospel singers, the family singers, that's who was on his label.
Okay.
The Goodman family. Gosh, I'd have to go back and look at some of the ones that he did, but.
Yeah.
So he had the music label and then he had the gospel label.
Well, I guess it is a pretty niche market because even people like Elvis and Cash, they put out their gospel records. They didn't sell like the secular material did, but they still did it. And, it's kind of...
people pull them out every year.
Right. Yeah, I was just listening to my Cash Christmas album.
Yes, yes. They're a very sacred part of your I still use CDs.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I've moved up to Spotify a little bit, but I like to whip out those CDs and pop them in and just play them all day, my special Christmas sections.
No, sure.
And my mother and dad's, I have my mother and dad's I listen to, and they kind of bring a little tear to my eye every once in a while because I remember Daddy, bringing the artist into the office and doing the album covers. And you know what's so funny, Colin? 2 of my grandchildren, maybe 3 now, they all want vinyl for Christmas.
Oh yeah, me too.
Isn't that amazing? It's come back around.
Yeah, I'm spending like $30 on records that I've listened to, hundreds of times. The experience of listening to it again on record is pretty cool. And certainly we're not alone with it. I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, last 10 or 15 years, you've really seen and that's the only record stores that are viable now. I mean, if you go in a record store in Richmond, it has a lot. It's mostly vinyl.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that now at Target. They're really getting away from their CDs and the old records too. Here in Nashville, the record stores, they just have so many. They've been viable for years, like you said.
Yeah. No, I mean, when you're in Nashville, it's it's Mecca for musicians and music fans, certainly. But I mean, you've always been able to get cheap records. I mean, even when I was a kid, get them for $0.25 or $1 at a secondhand store or something. So that's always been a great way to listen to music. Go back to the wedding. You went to Cash's house in Hendersonville. How much do you remember of that?
I remember the wedding was just over the top, beautiful, lots of flowers. I'm sure there were so many people there that were famous that I didn't even notice. But going back to the house, of course, the reception, it was inside. We went inside the house. It was his beautiful house that was on the lake, Old Hickory Lake in Hendersonville. And remember, it was just very unusual. It was kind of dark on the inside. I remember that. But I remember everyone just kind of sprawled out, walking through the house like it was an everyday occurrence. People were very relaxed, having a good time. Johnny was talking to people. June Carter was talking to people. I mean, you could just go up and talk to them like, thank you for having me. Oh, so glad you came. Enjoy yourself, go get some food, whatever. It was like just they were having friends over for dinner.
Yeah. And this was one of Cash's daughters that was getting married?
It was one of June's daughters.
Oh, one of June's daughters.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. I wonder when that. Do you kind of remember when that was?
It was around 71 or 72.
Okay.
Somewhere early in there, because I was at Belmont.
Okay. Yeah, offhand, I can't think of who that would have been.
He married Joe Simpkins, I believe was his name. I know his first name was Joe.
Was he a musician?
No, he was just, he sat by me at Belmont. We became great friends.
Okay. Well, and that's another cool thing about this time period in music. Maybe it still kind of goes on in Nashville, but I feel like it's gotten so big and so corporate. Like, everybody kind of knew everybody. Yeah. I mean, I know that's a cliche, but like, it really did seem that way in the early 70s. Like you said, Christopherson and Cash, and then later you have the Outlaws come in, so you have like Willie and Waylon and all those guys. But it really did seem that way. It was a very interconnected group.
My sweetheart could tell you tons of stories about Jesse Coulter. And
oh, wow.
I mean, he was in the business too. He has unbelievable stories about people, and I know he would love to talk with you about them.
Oh, I'd love to talk to him then.
He was in marketing for about 30 years all over the world, and he took Billy Ray Cyrus to Japan because the Japanese loved him, and we didn't know each other at the time, but while he's taking Billy Ray over to Japan, my brother was recording Achy Breaky Heart at the same time.
Yeah, it was huge. That's a huge song.
Oh, yeah. And so our paths have crossed so many times before we really started dating about 14 years ago.
Okay.
So, but he has a very colorful history. I need to connect you to. You would just get you a cup of coffee.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah, I'll hook y'all up.
We could talk like this. Well, I want to ask you too about your names. It sounds like, I don't know, how many siblings do you have?
There were 4 of us.
Okay.
And I was always told this was my story, that I was named after a Spanish actress that Mother and Daddy went to school in Texas, Christian. Well, he graduated from the University of Arkansas at Monticello, but he did go to Texas for a while. And the story was they went to a movie. I don't know how they could have even afforded a movie. They were so poor at that time. But there was a Spanish actress in the movie named LaQuita, and Daddy said, if we have a girl, I'm going to name her LaQuita. So I was asking Mother one day about the movie. She said, honey, where did you get that story? You weren't named after a Spanish actress. So I don't know. I don't know where he heard it. But I was one of the first LaQuitas.
You have a sister with a similar name.
So then LaRon, this is when Dad was off Broadway in New York, and he did work with a French actress, and her name was LaRon, and it's L-A, capital R-A-W-N, and the first name is J-A-C-Q-U-E, which is really a male version of Jack, but it's Jacques LaRon. So, but he kept the law thing again. And then my brother was born, and they just named him Joe because Dad said, I want to have a short name that I can call him off the football field. But my brother hated it and resented it all of his life. He wanted a fancy name.
Yeah.
He probably needed therapy over it. And then when the baby girl came, Daddy totally made up this name, LaQuita, theyre. And it's L-A-Q-U-E-L-A, LaQuita, like the Spanish K.
Okay.
I named my daughter, my firstborn, Ashley LaQuita, and my second daughter, Amber theyre. And then we have another theyre. So we've kind of kept the law thing going, and it's been so fun because people do not expect to see a blonde, blue-eyed family with such names.
Yeah. Well, obviously those are unique names, but it sounds like your dad, he was a pretty colorful guy, very unique.
Oh, we never knew what Daddy was going to come to the breakfast table in. He could come in a cowboy outfit with his Stetson and his custom patent leather boots. He could come in as very dapper, with his man about town hat and his tweed jacket. He could come as a captain of a ship. He'd have on all of his nautical, his nautical jacket, and he would wear his captain's hat on Saturday. He always had custom Cadillacs. He would do a yellow Cadillac with white leather. And I mean, I called it the pimp mobile, to tell you the truth, because it was so gaudy. But that's how he was known in Nashville. I mean, the man had such taste, though. he would always wear his silk shirts and his yellow jackets or his cream colored jackets and his cream pants. And he was just so darn handsome, and women would just flock to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was very colorful, very colorful. And when he'd get home from work, he would take off his jacket and put on his non-smoking jacket. So he had a closet of just velvet jackets with the satin lapels, or, a bright terry cloth white with big black polka dots on it. I mean, he was a trip to watch.
Were things monogrammed in your house, like towels and...
Yeah, some were. And they had a
bathrobes?
pair of black leather boots they were gorgeous boots, and he had a CS inlaid in white leather.
Well, I guess as a promoter, you have to project an image of
You do.
opulence, I mean, you have to
You do.
drive a big car. I'm not necessarily, but I mean, certainly some guys did that. It sounds like that's what your dad did. And I watched a video of him on YouTube. It looked like he was a tall
Yeah,
man,
he was
too.
very tall and
Okay.
slender. Mm-hmm.
So if he's in boots and a cowboy hat, he probably
Yeah.
looked like he was about 6'7" or something.
Well, no, he was really probably about 6'6" or 6'1" with the boots. He may have looked 6'2", but he
Okay.
was slender.
Okay.
And Mother was probably 5'5", so that did elevate him even more. And she always had the big blonde hair. Now,
Yeah.
Mother was a recipient of the Source Award and Women in Music Business in Nashville. So she was the first curator of the Country Music Hall of Fame.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, she's definitely in. I did some research on her. She was in the
Okay.
business too.
She ran my daddy's company with a yellow pad and a number 2 pencil.
Yeah,
That's how she kept her books.
yeah. So whenabouts did he leave Columbia? Was that like maybe mid-70s or so?
No, it was early 70s.
Okay.
Early 70s, because I thought, Mother said, well, your dad's not at Columbia. And that's when New York had taken over Columbia and Nashville, and they shook up everything.
Okay.
And of course, I'm in college, and I think, oh dear, how are we going to keep me in college? I mean, you worry about things like that. Even though
Right.
at the time, Belmont tuition, a semester that included board, books, tuition, was less than $2,000 a semester
I know.
at that time. It was unbelievable. But anyway, Mother said, your dad will come up with something. And he did. Immediately, he created Music Incorporated and came up with his little, budget music thing. And it flourished. I mean, just absolutely flourished. So
Yeah.
that was about that time.
Okay. And was it he just felt like he'd have more control if he went his own way?
Yes.
He
And
didn't, yeah.
he would always say, if you can ever work for yourself, do it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that.
Mhm.
And at least with a guy like Cash, I mean, he did some good stuff with Columbia in the 70s,
Mhm.
but around 71, 72, he kind of peaks out, I think.
Mhm.
And you do have the Outlaws coming kind of after him,
Yeah.
but I guess probably even with the Outlaws, I mean, Nashville was getting bigger and bigger throughout the 70s, and now it's enormous in terms of its influence with the music business. I'm guessing probably a lot of those guys by the 80s, it just wasn't their scene really anymore.
No. And this is almost prophetic. I remember in 64, 65, I'm trying to think when we moved to Nashville. When did the Beatles first go on the scene? Was it
64.
64, okay.
Yeah.
I had a girlfriend over from school. We were in my bedroom, and we were, of course, laughing, playing music, dancing around. And Dad walked in, and he goes, girls, I just want you to understand that today is a very historical day. Okay. These guys called the Beatles have come on the music scene, and it's going to destroy everything Nashville's doing.
Wow.
Of course, we were like, I want to hold your hand. Yeah. We love the Beatles, but boy, my dad was devastated. And that was a big turning point for Nashville.
I guess they eventually figured things out, but no, certainly I when I hear interviews of musicians that were around at the time, not even necessarily big musicians, but just like kids that were learning or something, they'd say, when I saw Ed Sullivan, it just like changed the world, changed my life.
It changed. It just changed. And do you probably know this, do you know who the Beatles opened for once?
I don't know who.
Brenda Lee.
Oh.
I know Brenda Lee, and I used to go to a Bible study at her house, and she has a room, with all of her records and accolades. And there is a picture of Brenda Lee and the Beatles and some things they have said to her, through the years. But yes, they opened for Brenda Lee. Our little rock around the Christmas tree. that lady is precious.
Yeah, it's funny when you hear the early days of some of these bands, like who they're opening for. Some very odd pairings sometimes. Like we just lost Mike Nesmith of the Monkees, and
yes,
Jimi Hendrix used to open for the Monkees, which seems very strange.
I still can't get over the drummer from the Stones.
Oh, Charlie Watts.
Yeah,
I know. You just get so used to these guys being around, and
yeah, they're like common in your household names.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't young. I mean, he was 80.
Yes, young.
You just think they're going to go on forever, and
you do.
Obviously, they won't. But no, I mean, the Monkees. There's only one of them. I think Mickey Dolenz is still alive, but the rest are gone, and yeah, just that it happens. But what did you end up doing with yourself? I mean, obviously your dad is in the music business. You went to Belmont. Did you ever work in music?
No. I worked a little bit. Years and years later, I went. I think Dad had gotten ill at that time, and so I said, "Mother, let me work here for a while." And I did a couple of things there, and I think it was too hard working for my mother and my sister. 3 very strong women.
Yeah.
In one office. But, I have a talent for contacting people and then getting in front of them. And I said, Mother, we've got all this music. It was 2000, I think is when it was actually. And I said, I went to Williams-Sonoma. I had an idea. Why don't we create a cookbook? And why don't we create the music that goes with the cookbook to do like a themed dinner party? So I went to Williams-Sonoma store and started looking at their cookbooks, and I saw the name John Weldon in San Francisco, who was the publisher. So I went back to the office and I called him, and he answered. I said, I'm from Nashville. I want to talk to you about your cookbook, creating a cookbook, putting a CD in it. Say you're doing Mexican night, Italian night. We promote the music that goes with the theme. They have the dinner party, and we tell them all the things to do. Well, 2 weeks later, we were in San Francisco at his office.
Wow.
Talking about that. And then also at the New Year, I thought we need to be doing music to promote the new year, the new millennial. So I called Corbell in California, talked with their marketing guy, and was there at his office 2 weeks later. Had the whole tour of Corbell and how they make it and label it and put the cork in it, and wanted to do the same thing with that.
Yeah.
So I get that creative thing from my dad. Still can't sing, can't do anything musically at all, but my true love was television. I loved doing television, so that was kind of my creative outlet.
Okay.
Did some stuff, like that, but mostly was a mama. Loved being a mother, loved being a grandmother. I have a special needs son, and really think my education, I had a preschool education degree from Belmont. I could apply all of that to my son and get him going.
Yeah.
To where he is today. And he has music in him somewhere, not creatively playing, but if a song comes on, he can tell you who it is, when it came out, who produced it. I mean, he just has this almost like a savant with music, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah. And did how many kids did you say you had?
I have 3, 2 girls, and then my son. No, they're not musical at all.
Yeah. Well, it's a tough business, even if you're really good. I mean, as you well know.
And I should have been a promoter. I think I would have been a great record promoter.
Yeah.
But, at the time I got married my last year of college, and a year later we're having a baby, and then then you're in PTA, and then you're doing all this. So, and that was important because, those creative years of young children, that's when you want your mama there.
Right.
You teach and you you do so many great things, and it paid off. Even with my son, it paid off all the things that I did with him. So I kind of backed away from that for quite a while, but I was never really I wasn't just really interested in that part of it.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like with your dad and your mom, luckily they could be really active in the music business, but they didn't have to travel the way a lot of people do.
No, they did not. People came to them, really.
Yeah.
No, if they traveled, they had a condo in Florida. That's where they would go right after Christmas for about 3 months, because their Christmas music was dead then. Christmas was over, they could relax, and they would go to Florida, and that was kind of their recharge. And then Daddy started a yacht business called Yachts Incorporated, and he had a big old yacht created and built in China, and he wanted to start selling yachts. And then he got, and I want to tell you, this yacht was something. It was just something. It was beautiful. And then Dad got sick, and so that kind of, when Dad got sick, everything just kind of changed. It was sad. It was really sad.
He was in Florida?
Well, just 3 months out of the year, and then he'd come back to Nashville.
Okay. Was that, he was in the southern part, I'm guessing?
He was in Daytona Beach Shoals.
Okay.
And they had a penthouse right on the beach, right on the ocean.
Okay. Yeah, so he didn't have to be with the bands, really. He would just sort of be in Nashville doing his thing. Yeah, because I don't know what people think about music when they're young and they're getting into it, but like, you're closer to being a truck driver than you are to being the Rolling Stones. I mean, it's like, you're driving everywhere.
Yeah.
It's rough
it's
on you.
It's very rough. Even today, and we have a lot of friends in the music business, and they say, you're out so many days of the year, and you come home, it takes you a day to kind of relax and refocus on your wife, your children, being in your own bed.
Yeah.
It's a hard life, very hard life.
And even if you're big, I think it's still that.
Oh, it's still that.
Pressure to tour. I mean.
And to be on.
Yeah. I don't know how they do it. I mean, especially now.
They love it so.
Yeah, and they get used to the road. That's not me. I mean, I couldn't do it. But yeah, they have a bus, and they get used to sleeping on the bus and going town to town. But yeah, it's a life. And if you're not with someone who is part of that, I mean, June and Johnny obviously were used to that, but a lot of people, it just sort of breaks their marriage. Mm-hmm. So that's been one thing. It's definitely given me inside look studying Cash of kind of not just the glamorous life, which I'm not necessarily all that interested in, but more the kind of the nitty gritty of it, and obviously Arkansas.
Very humble. I remember him being very, very humble.
Yeah. I a lot of people aren't like that. They let it go to their head, but I think because he came from the cotton fields, and a lot of those guys did, that they could kind of keep things in perspective.
Well, even Billy Ray, and he talked about this in the last couple of years on a show, and this is a true story because I was there. He would drive he was from Kentucky, and he was coming to Nashville, and Harold Shedd, who owned the Music Mill, he was kind of working with Harold Shedd. They pulled this song written by Von Tress, Achy Breaky Heart, which wasn't the original name of it. It was Please Don't Break My Heart or something like that. But anyway, my brother was working with him, with Harold Shedd, and he'd say, go over to my mom and dad's house during the day. They've got a pool. You can hang out and swim or whatever. So he would drive over to Mother's, and he'd hang out at the pool. And we had a housekeeper for 47 years named Mary, and she ran our house. She was a little girl from a dairy farm, and she started cleaning houses. And Mother said, would you come with me once a week? Well, we loved her so much, she became our family. But she would make tuna fish sandwiches for Billy Ray, bring him out to the pool. And my special needs son, who's probably, 4 or 5 then, he'd sit out there with him, and they'd eat tuna fish sandwiches and potato chips and sweet tea. And Billy Ray talked about this on one of his shows. He said, there's so many people that helped me along, and one was the kindest lady in Nashville, and she would let me come stay at her. He would never sleep there. Mother said, just spend the night. We would love for you to spend the night. He would never do that. But he would go hang out during the day. And then he got so big. But Billy Ray always would see the veterans or the special needs people before he'd meet anybody else in line. And he was, and I've been on his tour bus, when I lived in Philadelphia for a while, and he would come there. I would always make cheesecakes for his band and take to him after the band. And he was just so gracious and so humble. He's a great guy.
Does he still live in Nashville?
I think he does. I think he lives maybe I don't know where he lives now. He did live here in Franklin.
Yeah.
And when Hannah Montana, the crazy, little Hannah Montana girl, when she was so big, of course, my grandchildren, they were, of course, gaga over Hannah Montana.
Yeah.
So my mother picked the phone up one day and called Billy Ray. She had his number. She said, Billy Ray, this is Sharitha. My mother's name was Sharitha. Another crazy name. This is Sharitha, and my granddaughters, for their birthday, I want them to come meet Hannah Montana. And he said, well, Sharitha, you come right on out, and we'll be ready for you. And they did. They went out, and they went on set, and got to visit with her and get autographs and see all her Hannah Montana wigs. And that's the kind of guy he was. And he also sang at my mother and daddy's 60th wedding anniversary. Now, Dad was pretty sick then. He'd had a couple of strokes, but Billy Ray came and sang to them.
Yeah.
At Richland Country Club here in Nashville.
Okay.
He was
sweet. That's very cool. And when I first knew who Miley Cyrus was, I was like, Billy Ray has a daughter that's her own TV show. And
yes. Well, he didn't go down really to be in the show. I think they saw the charisma between them, and they said, we think you need to do this. And then I think they really worked it out in the contract. But my mother passed away 3 years ago, a couple of weeks ago, and she really hadn't been ill, but it was just really her time. And she said, it's just time. And I said, and I really took care of her last 4 years. I said, Mother, let's talk about your funeral. I know you don't want to talk about it, but I want to do however you want it done. And my sister came in from California, and we kind of planned stuff out. We went out we went to the cemetery and talked with the people and got it all lined up. And when we were getting ready to leave, Mother said, now y'all have fun. I went, Mother, it's going to be a blast planning your funeral at the funeral home, but we'll try to make it a joyous occasion. But anyway, when she was really dying 3 years ago, I said, Mother, now, I knew it was her last day. The doctors had warned me. I said, now, Mother, let's go over your funeral. She said, now, look, we've been over this. I just want Amy Grant to sing at my funeral. And if she wants to bring that husband of hers, I guess he can come too. And I said, Mother, you mean Vince Gill? She said, yeah, I know who Vince is. And of course she did, because Amy Grant's mother and my mother were best friends. So she knew Amy when she had made her first little record. But anyway, I said, okay, Mom. So I called Amy and I said, Amy, this is Mother's request. And she said, I will be there. And she came and sang at Mother's funeral.
Wow.
But that's so Nashville.
Yes.
If they have time, they're there. Joe Walker met her, with CMA for so long. I used to babysit her little girl, and Mother, she worked at CMA below the Country Music Hall of Fame, the original one on 16th Avenue. And when she died, I went to her funeral, and, there was Trish and Garth. I mean, there were so many people at that funeral that she had helped along the way. And everybody was just like plain old people. How are you? We're so sad to lose her. She did so much for the business. But that's Nashville. That's what I love about. You can go to the grocery store and see Carrie Underwood. She'll be in a ball cap just shopping away. Or, my sweethearts had sushi with Keith and Nicole. Hey, love your country. Been there. Yeah, where were you? I mean, talking like they're neighbors.
Yeah.
And if you approach people that way, like they're a neighbor and a friend, it's all cool.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty amazing place, and like I said, I've only been there once, and I'd like to go back and try to get into it more, because there's so much to see and do there, and obviously there's live music all the time.
All the time.
And I find it funny that Austin likes to think of itself as a live music capital of the world. I'm like, y'all ever heard of Nashville?
Yeah, y'all heard of Nashville. Austin's a cool place, and they've got great music. But
sure.
And then you got muscle shells. Muscle shells. Muscle
Yeah.
shells, you know.
Yeah, and I've been talking to some people and we have a guy who owns a record store here who's from Muscle Shoals, and
Oh,
he knows the drive-by truckers really well.
yeah.
And so they've sort of had this explosion of music from that area.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see these pockets, how they develop. And Muscle Shoals isn't very big, obviously, compared to Nashville, but it's produced so many great bands and great acts is pretty amazing. Obviously, you got Athens too and Georgia, but Richmond, we get the bands coming through, but we don't have the homegrown bands quite the way other parts of the country do. But it is nice to see these guys come through. I know Dwight Yoakam's going to be in town next year, and so it's nice to stay connected to those kinds of musicians. Because Little Rock was great. Everybody went through Little Rock. It was just all those all country outlaw guys. But you'd still get bands like Chicago and Skinnerd and all that. So it was a pretty cool music scene because people were kind of used Little Rock as, well, I'm going to Austin from Nashville, or I'm going to Nashville from Austin. So people maybe do a show in Little Rock in between. So we were fortunate in that respect. So I kind of missed that.
How long were you in Little Rock?
About 3.5 years. So not a long time, but I got a chance to kind of soak it up, and it's not a big city, and it's pretty quiet comparatively, but there's some cool things going on, and that's how I got involved with Cash.
Yeah.
They had some great things in the archive there, so that's how that all started. And I wanted to say I'm going to be writing an article on your dad for the Encyclopedia Arkansas.
Oh.
So once I'm done with that, I'll send it to you if you'd like to read it, and I'm sure there's some things that'll need to be adjusted. But if you have some good pictures of your dad, you could send me. The one where he's with Cash.
Yeah, I'll send that to you.
That sounds great. But if it's him alone with a hat or something, anything very visual would be really cool.
Oh yeah, we got some.
Okay. But LaQuita, it's been great talking to you. Thank you for reaching out, and yeah, definitely give your sweetheart my contact info, and maybe
I will.
After the holidays we could
set
something
the
out.
holidays. Yeah, he's got a great Rolling Stones story that is just phenomenal. And then there's people that he's met here in Nashville, and he managed some artists in Brazil that have done very well. And he kind of worked with young artists, kind of emerging, and his focus was to put them with the right choreographer. Like, we've worked with a choreographer that used to work with Beyonce and actually had his dog for a long time. But he worked with people to get them with the right producer, the right musicians, the right, to learn stage presence and all of that stuff. And but he would treat them like they were already a star.
Yeah.
He would go shopping with them and make sure they had the right outfit and all of their publicity photos. He took a lot of them himself, but talk about a creative guy. That guy is unbelievably creative, but he's got some stories that I think you would just really love. Yeah,
absolutely. So yeah, put me in touch with them, and we'll see if we can get together next couple weeks. And yeah, you had some great stories, so I'm really glad we could do this.
Well, thank you. And his name is John Brooks, by the way. J-O-N Brooks.
All right.
You want to hear one more Nashville story?
Sure.
There was the Music Row restaurant in Nashville called the Sunset Grill, owned by Randy Rayburn. And that's where everybody went in the music business. Mother and Daddy went there almost every day for lunch. It was the place to go. So my sister and I thought, well, we'll go there one day after work and just sit at a booth in the bar and just hang out, because it was the place to go. So behind my sister was a big guy in a cowboy hat and rough looking. He had a big old scraggly beard, and I'm thinking, why is he even in here? And I'm just kind of motioning to my sister and go, I can't believe he's in here. And she turned around and looked at him, and she said, have you ever heard of the song Friends in Low Places? I went, yeah. She said, well, that's who wrote it.
There you go.
And one day I was at Houston's on West End, when it was still Houston's, having lunch, and these this group of guys came in, and I want to tell you, I don't know how they let them in. They looked like homeless renegades, or just wild looking, and what they had on, and their hair and their beards, and I couldn't even imagine them letting them through the door. And whomever I was with, I said, I can't believe they let those people in. Look at them. Do you think it's safe to be here? And they went, oh, that's the Kentucky headhunters. So that's Nashville, okay?
Yeah, so some of these guys, they're a little scary, but they're the real deal.
They are the real. You just want to sit there and just, catch the drippings when they're singing.
Yeah,
but listen, I hope you can come back to Nashville and bring your wife.
I hope so. I got 2 little kids, and I'd love to bring them there. But yeah, hopefully maybe once my book is out, I'll get to do a book talk or something.
Well, let me know, for goodness sake, so I can meet you. And of course, if you do a book talk, are you talking with any book places here like Parnassus?
No, I haven't scheduled anything.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to wait till we have a publication date, I think.
Okay.
And,
well, good luck with that. Oh my gosh, absolutely good luck with that.
Thank you. Yeah, again, I'm glad. I'll send you a copy of the book once it's out, and
be sure you autograph it.
I will. Yes. And I'll be in touch about the Encyclopedia Arkansas, but I should be able to get working on that pretty soon.
Good. Well, I'll get some pictures probably after Christmas. I'll have to go through and find some in all my stuff.
Great.
But, I'll get you some pictures.
All right. Well, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you and yours. And
Thank
Happy
you.
New Year.
All right, that was my talk with LaQuita Scaife. I hope you enjoyed that. Good to talk about the Sun Boys, Johnny Cash and Elvis. Always interesting talking about great music, so I'm glad we could do that. And I am trying to wrap up work on my Johnny Cash book. I have sent back the page proofs and I've been working on the index when I can. Not been easy with this nasty cold, and I think the book should be out by the spring of 2022. We shall see. And it would be great if it was done right around Johnny Cash's 90th birthday, but that might be a little optimistic. Index, I can't remember how long they give me to do it. Hopefully about a month, because I'm doing it myself. Some people pay indexers, but not me, because I don't have the bread to do that. But I hope you're doing okay and getting ready for the holidays and wrapping things up in 2021. So I hope you have a holiday that is free of fascists, free of COVID, free of tornadoes, and we can think about doing things a little better in 2022. All right. I will be talking with you soon. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Take care. Bye.